Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is a very special day and I'm so glad you're here because today I'm gonna go over the books that I read in the month of April, the little recap of what I read, how I rated them, why I rated them what I did, and then I'm also gonna go over the books that I want to read in May, so some of the books that are on my TBR for the month of May. I'm very excited, super glad that you're here. Let's get started. I found a whisker! That's so exciting. Ah! Okay, I have to go put it away. I love finding loose whiskers on the floor because it feels so special. It feels like it's like an eyelash. Like you have to like make a wish. But I don't. But I just like keep them in this little box. But I love finding them. The cats are doing their own thing, so we'll probably hear them while I'm talking, but such is life. So we're just gonna go for it. All right, so the first book that I'm gonna talk about, I actually kind of finished it towards the end of March, and I want to say I maybe hit like a day into April, and it's just too special that I have to talk about it. Very first book that I read, or I should say finished this month, was Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. And let me just tell you, this was a 5-star read for me. I grew up reading The Hunger Games and watching all of the movies, and so I was very excited to get Haymitch's story. I'd been waiting for this. This was probably like my most anticipated release this year. And it did not disappoint at all. I think this is like a perfect Hunger Games book. And I was so excited to get it and read it. And oh my gosh, I read it like how I read Catching Fire when I was younger. Like Catching Fire, I read in one full sitting, and I never do that with books. And this, I read the majority of it in one sitting. It was just page turner. Like I just could not stop. It was a perfect Hunger Games book, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. We got a lot of the background on characters that we already know and love from the Hunger Games story, and so it made it really special to kind of see the connections that they had before we met them with Katniss. There was also a really huge part about like government manipulation and what that truly looks like, and how that plays a really large part in the world of Panem, or I should say the country of Panem, but in this like world, if that makes sense. But just seeing the parallels from Haymitch explaining his games in the Mockingjay versus getting the in-depth story here, it gives you a completely different understanding and appreciation for him and for his character. And I've been dying to watch the movies since I finished reading this, just because I want to stay in that world. Like genuinely, this flipped something in me. I also felt like in this book, and I don't know, I recently reread The Hunger Games maybe a couple of years ago, which is just a different experience. So if you haven't reread them since you read them as like a child, or if you've never read them ever, like you absolutely should. But I feel like this book went in depth about kind of like how the children are actually being treated in Panem in more of like a violent way than even like the original 3 books did. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, but that's how I felt like reading this. I felt like it was a little bit more like violent, and it was like, oh my gosh, like these are children, even more so than I felt in the original 3. So it was just a very powerful read, very sad, and very heart-wrenching, and it was just, I'm very excited to see how like the film adaptation goes, because you know those are always like hit or miss, and I've loved the past Hunger Games movies, including Songbirds and Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes. I always forget that title, but I even like that movie and how it was portrayed from the book and everything. So I don't know, I'm just very excited. But this was a 5-star read for me. The next book that I read in the month of April was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And I talked a lot about this in my reading vlog earlier this month. So if you want to really get an in-depth kind of review from there, you can go check out that video. However, I ended up rating this 4.5 stars. I have been recommending this book to so many people ever since I read it. It is so good, and I've been thinking about the characters a lot, which is usually a good thing. It was so well written. The characters were so complex, and I loved getting to follow them and follow their journey through the entire story. And I know I said this in my video, but it took me a while to get really invested in the story. I don't know why, but kind of like the first like quarter, maybe even the first half, just kind of took me a while to get into it. But then once I was in, I fell in love with the characters. But this is a very, very wonderful book, and I was very blessed to be able to read it. But like I said, if you want a little bit more of an in-depth review about like what it truly is about and all of that stuff, that'll be in my previous video. After that, I was able to read Book Lovers by Emily Henry, which was my second Emily Henry book. I have read Funny Story before this one, and I loved Funny Story, so I was very, very excited to get into this one. We are following Nora and Charlie, who are from New York City, and they both are in like the book industry. Like she's in publishing and he's an editor, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And they get stuck in this small town, and it's their story of them running into each other and getting to know each other. It was very, very fun to read. Like my last book, this book was also in my previous video. So if you want a super in-depth review and like all my thoughts and opinions on it, you can go into that one as well. But let me just say, Libby, which is Nora's sister, sold the book to me. Like literally, she, not in the way that it sounds like she's selling the book to me, but like she's what I loved her sister, and it's what made this book so amazing to me. I ended up rating it 4.5 stars, and I thought it was a very, very wonderful twist on like small town city people vibes. I think she did a really good job of kind of writing in and around that trope. It gets very self-aware at times because they are in like publishing and editing and all of that stuff. Like they read books for a living and edit books for a living and all of that stuff. So it gets a little like self-aware, which is wonderful. And so that's why I think like she's kind of going around the trope, because Nora is aware of the trope in her novel. And I've really, really enjoyed Emily Henry's writing style so far. I'm really excited to read Great Big Beautiful Life. That is her book that just came out, and I just got that one in the mail a couple of weeks ago. I'm excited to get into that one as well. But the next book that I read is totally switching up the genre. It is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. Completely going from rom-com, little Emily Henry to murder mystery whodunit type. But this book was such a blast to read. I ended up rating it a 4.25. We are following Dr. Shepard. He's the narrator of this story, and he has gotten in the middle of a like murder mystery that happened in his town and to people that he knows and loves. And Hercule Poirot? That's gonna be so embarrassing. But it's kind of in a series. So Agatha Christie has this Poirot series where he is a detective that goes into a couple of different scenarios and figures out like, oh, the murder mystery, whodunit, all of that stuff. This book is him coming out of retirement to finish out one final case, and it is about the murder of Roger Ackroyd, and we try to figure out who did it, and it's a lot of fun. Believe it or not, this book read much like a modern novel. I kind of get scared running into classics because it kind of takes a little bit more brain power to read. which makes it slow down for me. However, this book read so quickly and it read so well, and I had a blast reading it. I went into this book completely blind. I had no idea. The only thing that I had known about this book before I went into it was, one, it was one of her bestsellers, and two, that it was one of her most controversial. And I had no idea what that meant until I read it, and I loved every single second of it. I thought it was really brilliant, and the way that she handled the plot twists, I'm not gonna lie, I guessed the ending, like I guessed who did it pretty early on in the book, but I'm not gonna go into any details of like why I was able to guess it, because I don't want to go into any spoilers. So I'm sorry, but I'm doing this for the sake of anybody else who has never ever read or heard of this book before. So if you want to talk about the spoilers, then we could talk about it later. So after I read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, I ended up picking up this book called The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. In this book, we are following a girl named Casey, who is a recently widowed actress who is in her family's cabin to kind of get away from reality and get away from press. Towards the beginning of the book, there's a couple who moves into the house that is across the lake from Casey's. Their name is Catherine and Tom. And a couple of days in, Catherine actually is like drowning in the lake, and Casey saves her from drowning. And through time, Casey, with her little binoculars and a couple of glasses of whiskey, kind of starts like spying on Tom and Catherine, and she realizes that their marriage may not be the way that it appears to be. And so then at one point, like, Catherine like vanishes. This is not a spoiler because it's literally on the book sleeve. But Catherine vanishes, and so she is going to confront Tom and figure out exactly what had happened. I ended up giving this book a 3.75 stars. This book was entertaining, and it was a very quick read, and I was very invested in it. However, the first half of the book and the second half of the book feel like completely different books, which was really hard for me to wrap my head around. I'm not going to go into too many details about it, because I don't want to go into any spoilers or anything, but I felt like there was just no setup towards one of the twists. I feel like it just kind of like came out of nowhere, and by the end of the book, there were a lot of loose ends that needed to get tied together, and it wasn't done as well as I wanted it to be. There was like a plot line that kind of comes out of nowhere as well, right at the very, very end, that I was like, doesn't quite make sense to me. That was kind of why I rated it a little bit lower, but I would still recommend it if somebody wanted a quick, fun, and exciting thriller. It just wasn't my most favorite book that I've read. The last book that I read that was kind of like in my thriller kick was Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. And this book, we are following a girl named Amber who finds herself in a coma, and she can't remember the last couple of days. And it is a split timeline, so we get her perspective of now being in the coma, and then we also get her perspective from a couple of days. And as the book moves on, we are slowly understanding what has led to her being in the coma. I ended up rating this a 3.25, and it was sitting on my shelf for years, like genuinely for years, and I was always scared to pick it up because I didn't know if I was gonna like it very much. And I ended up liking it probably as much as I thought I was going to. It definitely had some good plot twists that got my jaw to drop. However, I feel like there were plot holes by the end of the book that I could not see the connection to. And you're probably like, well, Kendall, it says sometimes I lie, so she's lying at the beginning of the book and lying about this and lying about that. I'm like, yes, but also I want to know the truth. Like, I want to know what actually happened, and I can't make sense of it right now. And so then it just kind of made the book fall flat to me. It made me want to reread it to see if I missed a big part of the book, but I know that I didn't. It was just very, very interesting. I just didn't love it. I felt like they could have done things a little differently. I felt like there were so many things that happened to this poor girl during the time, like during the 2 days. Like, I don't know, but she's gonna need like serious therapy after all of this, because I can't believe that all of these events happened just within a couple of days. But after I finished that book, I needed to kind of get away from all the thrillers because I had done 3 in a row. And so I decided to pick up Emma of 83rd Street, which I read on my Kindle because I don't have the physical copy of it. So this is a modern retelling of Emma by Jane Austen, and it was such a wonderful read. It followed the classic from what I hear, because I've never read Jane Austen's original. But from what I've heard, it follows the original pretty well and does a really good job of kind of modernizing the story. But even without fully knowing that, I still had such a blast reading it. I loved the romance, and I loved the characters, and I loved Emma so much. And I loved the fact that it was in New York City. I felt like that was such a fun addition to that original story. I ended up rating it 4 stars. The reason that brought it down for me was because of the spice at the very end of the book. There was a bunch of build up. It's a slow burn romance, and so there was all of this build up into this beautiful relationship. And then within the last like 50 pages, there were like 3 spice scenes all smushed at the very end that I didn't love. And I just don't know if it's because of the romantic in me or what, but I wanted more substance once we got to the final like confession of love. And it felt to me that part just kind of like, I felt like it didn't end the way that I wanted it to because of all of the spice at the very end. But ultimately, like, I know how the original ends, and I know how this book ends, and so like ultimately it's okay. I just didn't love the spice. But this is such a fun series because there are 2 authors who write this book together, and their writing styles mesh really well, and they do such a good job at paying homage to Jane Austen. And there's another book that's out that's in this series of For the Love of Jane, I believe that's what the series is called, and it's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and so I'm very excited to read that. And I will most definitely be picking that one up, but you're just gonna catch me skipping through all the spice scenes because I don't need that personally, but to each their own. But it was still such a fun book, and I was very happy that I was able to read it. So these were the books that I read in the month of April. I read 7 books, which is really good for me. So I'm very happy with myself. I'm so excited to keep on reading, which, speaking of, we're gonna go into my TBR for the month of May. So the first book that I have on my May TBR is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. And the reason why this is on my TBR at the moment is because her new book that just came out, Say You'll Remember Me, is kind of, but not really, like a sequel to this one. It's in the same world, and I want to get introduced to the characters before I read her brand new book, but I want to make sure that I like her writing style before I do order her new book. And so I was like, what a perfect place to start than one of her more popular ones. In this book, we're gonna follow Emma and Justin, who are both cursed in the same way. So every guy that dates Emma will find his soulmate after they break up, and the same goes for Justin. Every girl that dates Justin finds her soulmate after they break up. And so Emma and Justin have this bright idea to, like, well, if we're gonna date, like, we should date each other, so then we each find our soulmates by the end of it. And so it's their story together, and I'm very excited to read this, and I hope that I enjoy it as much as I think I will. Another book that's on my May TBR is How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. Matt Haig? I hope that's how you pronounce it. And this is the same author who wrote The Midnight Library, which I absolutely loved that book. And this one is about a man named Tom who has this rare condition where he lives like an uber amount of extra years than like your average person. Like I'm talking like 500, 600 years. And so it's his story. It is technically there. I read somewhere, and maybe it's on the back of the book, or maybe it's in here, but I read somewhere that it's like a rom-com-y type. So I don't know if it's more of like a literary fiction subplot romance or if it is considered a romance, but I am very, very excited to read this. I think it'll be a lot of fun to get immersed into this world, and I really enjoy Matt's writing, so I'm very excited to get into this one. So the next book that's on my May TBR is called They're Going to Love You by Meg Howry, and this book I picked up from my local library, so I most definitely need to read it this month and within the next couple of weeks. But it is about a girl called Carlisle. I'm gonna figure out how to pronounce this right now.
Yeah, the S is silent.
Okay, so it's Carlisle. That's how you say her name. But we follow Carlisle as I don't know if we see her childhood, but we get a lot of background into her childhood and why she doesn't see her father that often, and we get background that her mother was a professional ballerina, and so she wants to walk in her mother's footsteps, but then also stay connected with her family. And so it's kind of her story doing just that. 19 years later, when Carlisle receives a phone call that unravels the events of that fateful summer, she sees with new eyes how her younger self has informed the woman she's become. So I don't know if it's going to be split timelines or how that's exactly going to work, but I'm very excited to see how this plays out. I believe it's just going to be a wonderful literary fiction that we get to read together. So I'm very, very excited. The other book that I have on my May TBR, I also got at the library, so I better read it, but it's called The Bookshop of Yesterdays by Amy Meyerson. And we follow Miranda Brooks, who has grown up going through her uncle's bookstore, and then when he passes away, she becomes the new owner of it. And during that time that she's kind of taking over the ownership of this bookstore, she realizes that her uncle left her a lot of clues that kind of unravel her past and unravel like stories about her mom and things like that. So I'm very excited. I think this is going to be very interesting to read. I just love reading about books and book shops in general, and I love little clues and little mysteries, so I'm very excited to read this one as well. The last thing that I have on my May TBR is kind of like, we'll see if I'll be able to get to this one, because I want to start reading C.S. Lewis's Narnia books, because I've never ever done it in my entire life. Look, this one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, is like completely different like coffee than all the rest of them. It's so annoying, I know, but there are 7 books in this series, and I literally don't even think I realized there were that many, but I've always wanted to read them, and I feel like they're all small enough books. They're children's books that I would be able to get through them fairly quickly, but I do want to get into this world. And I know that there's a new adaptation that's being made right now. I think Greta Gerwig is the director, but I want to read the books before I watch any of the movies or any of the anything, because I literally know nothing about these books at all. So I'm very excited to get into this, and I hope that I'm able to read at least the first book, maybe the second. I don't need to finish it in the month of May, but I do want to get started on them. Okay, you guys might have to help me out with this one, because from what I understand, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was the first book published. However, The Magician's Nephew is the prequel. So do I need to read it in the way that it was published, or should I read it in the way, like, chronologically timeline? So let me know what I should do, because I really don't know, and I'm gonna have to look it up if you guys don't tell me. So let me know which one I should start off with this, but I'm very excited to get into this. I've read a couple of excerpts from C.S. Lewis's like nonfiction books, and I've really enjoyed his writing, and I really like the way that he kind of sees the world, and so I'm excited to see his not his nonfiction, his fiction stories as well. So I'm very excited to get into that as well. Here I have my May TBR. Let's see how much of these I get through. Hopefully all of them, especially those library books, so that they don't get turned in late. But this is what I have for the month of May. Let me know if you've ever read any of these books, or if you know anything about them, because I would love to kind of get your guys' opinions and thoughts, and then we could talk about it once I've read them. But I'm very excited to get into the month of May. But that was everything that I read in April and everything that I hope to read in May. So thank you guys for sitting with me and listening to me talk about those books. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.